All right, everybody, welcome to the Faith Wired podcast. Pastor Kyle and Pastor Marvin here with Sheriff Swanson from Genesee County right here in Michigan. And we've got some exciting stuff to go through today. I'm going to read a couple scriptures and then we'll get into a conversation with the sheriff. But also, if you haven't seen the clip, we're going to throw that up on the screen here in just a moment, in which you'll be able to see some of what actually sparked our interest in having this conversation. And so our idea here is building bridges, that we are ambassadors of Christ. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, starting in verse 20, it says this: "We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God." And so the idea, we talked about the ministry of reconciliation on Sunday, becoming a bridge builder, and how even as a pastor, obviously I'm trying to build bridges between people and Christ, but even those of us who are not in vocational ministry, we are to be bridge builders in society as ambassadors for Christ. And so we want to have a conversation with the sheriff today about how in this opportune moment we can see God's strategy for building bridges between law enforcement and especially the African American community as a conduit for social progress and ultimately a greater level of freedom and liberty that's conducive to the work of the kingdom of God in our society. And so Pastor Marvin's going to share here for a moment, and then we're going to watch the video clip and dive right in.
Absolutely. Just to basically start, from where we left off last week about reconciliation. And just as Pastor Kyle had read here in the scripture, it's an awesome thing to understand that reconciliation is not just something that we do as Christians, but it's who we are. So it's within our nature, it's within who we are. And I love what also in Proverbs 4:7 it says, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding." And so it's a key thing here that as we understand reconciliation, we also get understanding of one, what's the next step here, and then also how can we partner together, how can we actually build the bridge. And so Pastor Kyle had already mentioned that there's a clip that we are going to take a look at, so join us on the other side, pay attention to this.
Oh, I think he took off.
Okay, yeah, man.
He took off.
Pastor Hawkins, I was going to tell you, we want to be with y'all for real. So I took my helmet off and laid the batons down. I want to make this a parade, not a protest. You got little ones here, you got dogs, so what's up? So listen, I'm just telling you, these cops love you. That cop over there hugs people, so you tell us what you need to do.
Walk with us! 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 Walk with us!
Let's walk. Let's walk.
All right, we're back now with Sheriff Swanson. I hope you enjoyed that clip. Definitely a moving thing for a lot of Americans to see in the midst of a time where everybody was concerned that all we were going to see was an increase in toxicity between law enforcement relations with the black community. But we saw a great light shine in the midst of Flint. And so we're here with the sheriff right now. We just wanted to start by, I know a lot of people are curious, okay, man, where did this idea come from? What overcame you?
Yeah.
Were you nervous? I mean, if you'll give us a little background on just what led to that moment that we just saw.
Yeah, I love talking to church folks because I can say it's the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I have thought, and with me in the studio is my dearest friend, my loyal friend, Mike Tokarczyk. He's the undersheriff. Mm-hmm. He's a believer. He was there with me. That was so unscripted. It was so organic. Nobody even knew they were going to the Flint Township Police Department. Mm-hmm. We had been with the group for 2 hours prior to this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There was no indication on all the social media, and we'd been following all the social media throughout the whole day. The day before, we saw that they were going to go and bring fuel. They're going to bring bottles. They're going to bring stones and bricks, and we were following all that. Yeah. But nobody said we're going to the police department. But the night before, on the 29th of May, around the country, we saw it just flip a switch. Mm-hmm. They burned CNN. They torched a sheriff's office in Oregon.
Yeah.
They torched precincts in Minneapolis. So when they turned towards the Flint Township Police Department, it was immediately a red flag that okay, they're going there deliberate, because where it is, it's so far off the beaten path. You have to be purposeful to go there. So to answer your question, as we were gearing up, helmets, you saw the helmet, vest, we had everything that you would see around the nation. We had our shields, batons, tear gas launchers, shotguns with less than lethal weapons, our rubber bullets, everything. Front line, fortify the line, the divide that you saw. But as I looked down to my right, and there was only 6 of us from the sheriff's office there, 4 TAC guys, the undersheriff, myself, there was a major, I'm sorry. And nobody was communicating because we were all kind of taking it all in. You have veteran cops there. And then you also had other police agencies there, that from rookies to all sorts of folks. There's multiple agencies involved. But when they did the all cars, they were coming from everywhere. Like sirens just came from everywhere. And the people were by the hundreds coming over the top of the hill. And looking back and talking to some of the people there, you could just feel the hostility, and you could feel the temperature change. And it was the moment that I saw a little bit of a fist bump. I subconsciously saw that there was some movement there, but people were yelling and screaming, and people were trying to agitate. But I have to say that I say the Holy Spirit, because for such a time as this, God equips us to do things that we wouldn't normally do, and that's where the armor of God comes in.
Yeah.
So when I took off my helmet, I didn't plan on it. I didn't plan on walking. In fact, walking up to it, we were told that the incident command is in the police department, and it wasn't even a second thought. That's not where I want to be. Yeah. I'm on the front lines, not to be a hero, not to be macho, but I just felt that's where my place was. I'm very comfortable in the urban environment. I'm very comfortable in mass crowds. I believe as the sheriff, the chief law enforcement officer, the head guy, been on the job 27 years. I understand people. It was all that came together, plus other things we're going to talk about, that I said, that's it, I'm going to walk in the crowd. And there was a street pastor there named Jeff Hawkins, who was big in the community. He's a black dude that I've been friends with for 7 years. He had 2 kids murdered in 2 different situations. I had just seen him 20 minutes before, and I called him up. And he wasn't even going to the protest there. I said, bro, where are you? He goes, I'm in the crowd. I said, where are you? And immediately I looked, and boom, there he is. Yeah. I said, stay there, I'm coming for you. And I would love to say that it was planned, it was scripted, it was something I said, if this happens, I'm going to do this. But in fact, when I watched that video, I look back, and psychologically, I watched Chris Swanson. And I asked the same question. I say, what was going on in your head? And all the things that I said were all completely out of instinct, make it a parade, not a protest. I was looking back, trying to minimize not the movement or the righteous anger, but minimize and de-escalate. Like, parade versus protest has 2 different psychological responses. So that was all autopilot. But when they said, walk with us, like I asked the question, what do you need us to do? Walk with us. I looked just now again, I went, and I could think almost like Terminator. You know how Terminator, when he sees all, I was thinking the whole thing. And I honestly believe, I said it was, and I've said to Mike, the Holy Spirit touched that moment. And I believe that everything inside of my spirit was listening to the Holy Spirit, like, this is what I want you to do. It was so, first of all, it's the worst tactical decision you could do. Second, it was so unlike what police were doing. It's so unlike what I was trained for. Right. It's like, take off your armor and walk into the belly of the beast. Like that's not, but God's not, doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah.
And little did we know that decision and that obedience would lead a global movement and lead peace around the nation and see the doors that have been opened. So, it was just, I said, as a veteran police officer, it was the greatest day of my police career.
Yeah, it's awesome, because we can honestly say that it set an example for all of the nation to see. This is how this is supposed to be.
That's right.
Yeah. Because, like you said, you mentioned that there were a whole bunch of stuff going on throughout the country, in every different state, where you had people wanting to get on camera for attention to tear up a news station, and so you could just see the chaos. And then comes Flint.
That's right.
Where you would think no other place.
What good comes from Flint?
What's going to happen in Flint? Because Flint has this this habit of, when we do these things, it's something might pop off. My question to you is this: the main reason with all the protests and even the riots, the George Floyd situation was the straw that broke the camel's back. What about that situation in itself is helping the law enforcement, especially us in Michigan, as far as our law enforcement and in Genesee County? What is as far as that situation in itself? How is it helping basically point to different strategy and different ways to go forward as a police department and also as a county?
Yeah. Good question, because it's got a lot of answers.
Yeah.
I've said this before all over the media outlets around the world, that George Floyd changed American policing forever. Now, why him? Why not Eric Garner?
Sure.
Why not Malice Green? Why not Rodney King? I don't know the answer to that, but I can give an example. When my dad, who was a Detroit police officer, was in the 1960 riots, I grew up in that environment hearing about the stories. Well, that prompted reform. That prompted change. And every big incident, especially in law enforcement, when it happens, it prompts change. But change doesn't come without the pain of someone else.
Yeah.
And I think everything was lined up perfect, that when what happened in Minneapolis happened, people across the country were just at their limit. They're tired of political promises. They're tired of all these reforms. They're tired of all. They want action. And that's why it boiled over into physical protest.
Right.
Completely different than rioting, going into someone else's house and disrespecting. That's another issue. I'm talking about righteous protest.
Right.
And I'm talking flipping tables in the tabernacle.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when you know when something's wrong, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And you gotta shock the conscience.
Yeah.
What happened there in Minneapolis shocked even cops around the nation. Like, that is so not who we are. You can't even look at, well, what happened before and what was the reason? It doesn't matter.
Right.
What happened there in 8 minutes 46 seconds sent a message to us as much as a community. And then when you see the response, see, many times law enforcement, we are our own worst enemies, because we don't talk a normal talk. We talk cop talk. We testify, when we give statements, and we like to hold information back, and that doesn't always relate to citizens. So what I found is that simple act that happened in Flint Township, unbeknownst to me, was an act of communication that the public, not just here in Flint or Genesee County, but around the world, they wanted to see somebody in that position of leadership, who's a white dude, who is a male, who's a police commander, have a different way of responding, instead of saying, you know what, we're going to wait for the opportunity to review all the facts and all this. And that's what I saw. And the other thing is, because of that traumatic incident in Minneapolis, it opened up conversations that people have not had. Conversation at dinner tables, conversation among people that are white and black, conversations in churches, white country club churches that don't have a single black person in there.
Sure.
Churches that, and I know we're going to get to the question, that need to be on the front lines as much as law enforcement does. And that's what's prompted all the reform, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that as well. And now we are, as of this podcast, we are 4 weeks plus, not a single arrest, not a single fire, not a single injury in Flint, Michigan. That's had protests nearly every day now because of what you just said. There's Flint pride restored.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So I'm sitting here listening to you talk about how your faith really played a role in your decision-making process. All the training in the world couldn't provide what we witnessed that day. So we're talking about how ambassadors of Christ and how it's such an opportune moment for the American people to recognize the value of the church in this hour. Does that resonate with you as a result of this, like to where it's like almost like it clicks, like that's where the rubber meets the road of why we have a country that fosters an environment of faith, so that we can see social change that comes from the supernatural meeting with the natural right there in the moment of opportunity? So what are your thoughts on that?
I will testify publicly to what happened to Chris Swanson.
Okay.
And I can tell you that moment.
Yeah.
I look at the people that were there from this office, and they were believers with me. I can name you the names, starting with what I just mentioned. That being said, when you are like-minded and equally yoked, then what I do as the sheriff is only going to benefit. But what I do is not who I am.
Right.
You know, I'm a child of God. I have a love for people. I know that love for people means all people, including Muslims and atheists and transgender and white and black and Christians and all people.
Right.
And to be the light and to example what was given to me.
Yeah.
And that is dignity, equality. You look at Christ's ministry for 3.5 years. He talked to the people that were the worst of the worst.
Right.
And so I just get to use the platform that I have as the sheriff to combine the two and mash them together. Now, full disclosure, all right, January 6th at 12:01 was the day I took office as the sheriff.
Yeah.
And I've been on the job here at the sheriff's office since I was 18 years old. When I was 18, hired by a seasoned Marine deputy, I said, one day I'm going to be the sheriff. That's another story. It's a great story.
Yeah.
And that day when I was 12:01 hit, I was on my knees at my prayer bench. And I'm not afraid to say it because this is just who I am. And I saw what happened to Solomon when he was given the keys of the kingdom from David. He praised in 1 Kings 3, wisdom and discernment. That's it.
Yeah.
Wisdom and discernment. And you mentioned that in Proverbs. Wisdom. Like, give me the ability to know what to do. And the discernment to figure it out and when to play that. And that's what was happening. That's why, like, I know what goes on in my head. In that moment, it all came to pass. Like, he gave that to me.
Yeah.
He said, I want you to go here. I want you to do this. Like, none of that is Chris.
Yeah.
And so I could not, and I never will, minimize or diminish the power of what's been built inside of me as my internal spirit, my conscience.
Yeah.
That will flow out in my physical actions. And that's what you saw there. And that's what people see. And I've gotten communications, no joke, within 48 hours of May 30th at 8 o'clock that night from the Target parking lot. That video that you just saw, and that Chris Swanson was seen 3.2 billion times within 48 hours. Like, how did that happen? How did I get letters from around the country, messages around the world, from Africa, from London? Why? Because like-minded people in this world still want peace. They want dignity. They want equality for people. That's what I found is people are just tired of fighting. And as the church, we need to accept all those people, not agree, but accept them all to say, listen, how can we become a better society by using what's built inside? You know, just prior to coming here, I have a tremendous Muslim friend group, and they know where I stand, and we have different belief systems in some things, but we have a common goal of taking care of each other, respecting, loving each other, taking care of families. You know, and I'm not trying to convert them; they're not trying to convert me. It's not about, you know, it's not about that. As far as I know where I stand, but I'm not going to alienate them. You know, I'm not going to alienate somebody who doesn't look, act, or live like me. And you saw it at that moment. It's like, that's it. Just, what do you need? This is what I need. Let's walk.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I was thinking about how a lot of people were reaching out to you afterwards. In what way did you feel led to respond to, maybe, I would assume some of them were asking for help, like, or were they asking for advice? Were they asking for, or was it just, hey, good job? And did you have some opportunities to give some direction to other law enforcement officers and sheriffs and so forth? And so I guess my question is, for those watching, like, how have you found a practical opportunity to say, hey, here's a better way we can engage with the community when there are hostile environments being fostered, etc. So.
Well, there's twofold answer. Number one, words whisper, actions scream. And so what people saw and what they responded to in their comments is, thank you for being the light. 99-1 was just, thank you for giving me hope. I'm talking people from Flint, people who were from Flint, people who know from Flint, people who have family, business owners. It was crazy. Canada, England, all over the place, many from the West Coast. So I think what it saw was, wait a second, you can be a change agent. You can be courageous. And again, please, I don't want anybody to think that this is the Chris, show and all this. This is just what I was able to do. So I say that because take my name and face out of it, plug your name and face in it.
Right.
You have the ability by yourself, if you have a breath in your lung and a beat in your chest, to do exactly what I did in your own circumstance, in your circle of influence. And so what I found is people were so hungry for somebody, especially in my field of law enforcement, to step out and break the chain. That's what's happened for years. And if you look at throughout our world history, people that were what we call the most regarded world leaders everywhere are people that united folks
Yeah.
and didn't divide. They
That's right.
united folks. They brought people together. And in most of those very hostile situations, and to your second point, I've taught cops all over the country, and I can say this, they are hard nuts to crack.
Yeah.
And when you do something, they won't admit it sometimes, but they will see your example and they'll mirror it. And that's what we saw across the country. I would love to say that it was because it happened in Flint Township, but I'll say this, across the country, for whatever reason, you saw a complete de-escalation of violence. And I don't know why they did it. Again, I didn't talk to people.
Yeah.
I've got plenty of people that reached out to me, from heads of NFL teams to chiefs of police to sheriffs to the National Sheriff Association. So all those cool things happened, but more people were moved by what happened, but I'll never know, which is just fine with me.
That's good.
One of the awesome things that I have seen is, and I've seen pictures of this, but there are people who would say, I liked what I saw, but he could do more. And I'm pretty sure faces come to mind of different folks that would say certain things. And my question to you is this: what is your response to folks who would say, man, he walked with the protesters, great, but I want to see more? What would your response to that be?
Well, it'd be no different. I use this analogy. Is like, if I'm with my bride, we'll be married 26 years next month. I can say publicly, man, I love my girl. Like, we are happily married.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, yeah, but what does that look like?
Right.
Well, probably a lot of it you'll never know, because you're not in my house.
Right,
You don't see what I
exactly.
do when I'm not.
Exactly.
You don't see my preparation. But one thing you can see is my actions. So to those that are always waiting for the other shoe to fall, that is rocket fuel to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a unicorn. I believe this in my heart. I believe that God has put me in a position to be that person where you can literally do the right thing without any strings attached. And what's taught that to me, growing up into an environment where, through the church, random acts of kindness, service on the mission field to third world countries for the last 7 years that can give nothing back, building projects in the middle of Honduras and Chile and Grenada and Haiti and Dominican and Mexico, and fighting for people that are completely powerless to help you. See, we live in an environment that why does a pastor, he must have some kind of, he wants my money.
Right.
Why? What do you mean? Why would you say that? There's got to be a reason. That to me, that's what blows people's minds, is when you do what you know is the right thing to do.
Right.
Then your actions will prove it. So all I can say is, don't listen to a word Chris says. Just watch what he does.
Yeah.
Look at the fruit on the tree. And I was checked by the Detroit Free Press on that pretty heavy. Brian Gumbel checked me hard on that. Lower Ingram. And they were hitting some hard questions. Glenn Beck did the same thing. These people from all rights and lefts and in the middle, they were saying the same thing. They're like, well, that was a good day, but what about this?
Yeah.
And I would just consistently say, when you look at someone's life, their personal life in every aspect, their professional life in every aspect, how they handle themselves, you look at, if they have a pattern of success, then they're doing something right. You may not know what, but it's a pattern. It's like going to somebody who has a home-cooked meal, and from the appetizers to the salad to the main course to the dessert, it's all good.
Right, yeah.
You don't know how they did it.
Right,
You don't even know the ingredients, but you know the end product.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I say to those folks.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, in that vein, I'm thinking about how that moment presented an opportunity for law enforcement across the United States and beyond, because there's been demonstrations in Australia and Canada and all these different places, anti-racism demonstrations, and a lot of police departments took advantage of the opportunity to model some of the same principles that we found in the Flint protests, where the police officers and so forth joined. How do you see law enforcement as a community taking advantage of this continuing opportunity, where our society is having a long-standing conversation about race relations, in my opinion, in a way like never before? And wow, what an environment for some real progress. So what do you think the law enforcement can do enforcement community can do to take advantage of this? Maybe I always say the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized within the lifetime of the opportunity.
Yeah, well
And so
said.
that's really encouraging me with this, and I feel like we as the church need to be raising our voice and say, law enforcement, do something now. This is your chance.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And,
you're at, where
and
you're
I'm going
at.
to tell you that's where I have challenged myself is to be that voice because I believe God's called me to be that voice, and He has me at this platform. And you're right. There's no better time right now in law enforcement historically than right now. I believe it in my heart, and that change is because we, the police, in many ways has caused this confusion. But we can also be the solution. And so the burden falls on us. You need police. You need people that care for others. There are unbelievable people that put on a uniform every day across this country and around the world. And they do that because Romans 13 declares us as sword bearers against unrighteousness. But righteousness and justice and mercy and grace are all part of that process. You can't just be all justice.
Right.
You have to have the others. That's why protect and serve. And law enforcement, and if I ask you right now, tell me the name and the face of law enforcement around the nation that can speak truth to the people that the people can relate to. And there's a huge vacuum. And I believe that the opportunity for me is to step into that vacuum using this opportunity here in Flint as, hey, this is what's possible. Now, trust us on this. And if that can bridge some gaps in law enforcement, then that's what we're going to do. But to those cops out there who will not learn a single lesson from what we've done over the last month, then shame on us for that. Because we're going to go right back to where we were. And if you look at an evolution, no matter what, everything evolves for the better. You know, otherwise we wouldn't see the technology that we see today. The church has evolved, the people, we all evolve, we all reform. And we are going to seize that moment. I'll see to it. And you'll see that across, it's not just me, across the nation we know that it has to change. But pulling back on the police's ability to police, that's not the answer.
Okay.
It's I say this, I can pull someone over and give them a ticket and tell them, have a nice day, and they thank me. I can pull them over and give them a ticket and we're fighting. It's all on how you handle it. And we have some great professionals out there, but we have work to do on our end. And these daily conversations that we have with the people that are in the mix, that are happening here, policy changes, culture change, how we deal with people, that's happening on an everyday basis around the nation, but certainly here in Genesee County, I promise you.
What do you think in the realm of policy changes might be some of the most practical and changes that would actually bring some pretty immediate relief or some level of results that can be observable in the environment that are there any on your
Here's
list
some
that you say
immediate
those are low hanging fruit?
Number one, a national registry for cops that are fired that are assaultive or aggressive. You can't cop shop and go and get fired here because you beat a human being and your buddy works in Butte, Montana. No offense to Butte, and they hire you, and next thing you know, you're I just picked it, but next thing you know, you're out there and you got another cop job. You don't change the mindset. Number two, we have to be realistic. You can't legislate a good heart. You can't legislate common sense. So legislation is good, but it comes from the top. Police leadership, and we see it all the time. I mean, all the time. I see a lot of people that are wearing Chief Eagles and stars, I'm sure, and they are not doing their job. They are not setting the tone. So accountability by those police agencies to say, hey, this is how we're going to treat people. Number three, ban chokeholds for non-life-threatening situations. Chokeholds have all historically been for deadly force, but we see things that are happening, like Eric Garner getting choked to death for a cigarette. I'm like, what? I mean, those are some of those things. And then of course you have mandatory training. I give an example. When I was 20 years old, I became a licensed paramedic. I'm still a licensed medic. To keep my license, I do continuing education credits every single year. Every 3 years I get a new license. As a police officer, I can graduate the academy, and as long as I qualify on the range one time a year, I never have to go through training again. Are you serious?
Wow, that's
so mandatory continuing education for police officers to maintain their certification. That has to happen. I tell the cops, you're going to have to not give up on your people. Don't give up on your community. And for the community, please don't give up on your police. You can't do that. We shop at the same stores you shop at. We go to the same places. Our kids go to school in the community. We bleed. We hurt. We have families. We're humans, but we're not perfect. We're called to do something that is very uncomfortable. And when and that right there is what I call the authority. People historically have always bucked against authority. I mean, that's what created the great sin.
Yeah.
You know, it's why would you say that?
Yeah.
He doesn't want you to have power.
Yeah,
And that's created the fall of man. So this is something we've been fighting forever. It's sin in our nature.
Yeah.
But we have the ability to enforce. We have a mighty authority, and we can never minimize that.
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, going back to one of the things you said, just as far as just the heart and legislation towards the heart, one of the things that we've talked about a lot is just the fact that we could put, laws can be put into place and all of these things, but what happens with the heart of a person?
Yeah.
Because obviously there's, you mentioned this, it's a sin issue that we're dealing with here within our nation. My question to you is this: when it comes to the church, how can we do a better job at bringing a healthy conversation about law enforcement and also the situations that are, as far as the racial issues? Because right now you're seeing a lot of churches have these conversations.
Yeah.
Some are successful conversations.
That's right.
Some are not.
Train wrecks.
So how can we do a better job at saying, hey, let's come to the table together and let's bridge the gap?
Yeah.
Whew, great question. So I go back historically, and I see that pastoral leadership throughout many parts of our history allow people to defend freedom, fight for freedom, protect those that are vulnerable. I mean, the church has always stood up.
Yeah.
And when the church went to the background, that's when people were left alone. So just like you said, now's no better time for law enforcement to make the change. Now is no better time for church leaders to pop up in society and say, this is it. We're going to work with both sides. We're going to be mediators. We're going to be ambassadors. And we saw that happen. To give you a perfect example, COVID hit the first week of March in this community. Within 1 week, all our social services, from the Red Cross, from G-Card, which does Meals on Wheels, from our food bank, all of them, within 1 week, their staff went down to half, 50%. The demand was always there, but the staff to serve was gone.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now we have people panic. So the basic needs of the human being, which is food, shelter, and clothing, and the next being security, immediately people were panicking. So this is the office culture that we have. Immediately, it's not even a law enforcement issue. The sheriff's office stepped up and on March 17th deputized 40 faith-based leaders in the community. All walks of life. I put an email out to 480 churches. I said, this is what we need. You have the people. We need to deploy the church. And March 17th, they came to the jail. We swore them in as deputy sheriffs,
Oh, wow.
pastors. And from March 17th to June 1st, delivered 1 million pounds of food between 9 hubs. Those people that went to bed hungry and certainly scared were now fed. That wasn't police work.
Yeah.
We had our own staff delivering food, and all those hubs were at not only just churches, but addiction centers and food pantries. But it united, and what it did is it just took care of an immediate need. And I made it very clear, this isn't to build your congregations. It's you know better than anybody about service.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, your congregation has to understand the heart of a servant.
Yeah.
And the Bible says to be the first, you must be the last and servant to all. And that service means people that you just aren't comfortable with. And you may have to cross the street outside your neighborhood to go talk to somebody that doesn't look like you, act like you.
Right.
That's service.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the church has to be more than ever. And we have, as an example, Pastor Derek Aldridge from Second Chance. He's a brother of mine, and he's a North End pastor, did time, but he comes into the jail unannounced. I talked to him on the way here to this podcast. Hey, what do you need, brother? I'm praying for you right now. He comes unannounced to go in the jail to talk to inmates because families of inmates, they can hear it from me, but coming from him, there's a little bit more trust and credibility. Not that they distrust me, but I'm on the inside. So all those, I use pastors. I use pastoral leaders, because that's going to be a huge foundation to what your follow-up question is going to be towards the end, is how do we deal with mass incarceration? How do we deal with the criminality of people? How do we do that? It starts with families, it starts with churches, it starts with education. And if we can do those 3 things right, we won't have to worry about an incarceration problem.
Yeah.
You fix the proactive things, you don't have to react.
Yeah.
That's good.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Well, I'm thinking about people who are watching right now and how there's even that bias that we have just ingrained in us from whatever political or socio-economical background. And I was going to ask you, as you've been kind of close to the grind on this, what are some of the attitudes that play a role in helping progress, and what are some of the attitudes that you're observing that are playing a role in hindering progress just in people that we could start pointing those out so we can rid ourselves?
Okay, so to help, what I found was people need to let their guard down, and vulnerability is not weakness, it's strength.
Okay.
So do things that are uncomfortable. Like do things that are inconvenient. It's easy, and that's why, you know, I love when folks take a very, passive way out of conflict, and they don't want to deal with it. It doesn't fix the conflict. They just take a passive way out of it. No, sometimes you got to confront the beast. And those people that are like, I want to be a part of it, like this church.
Yeah.
You are exactly the example that's going to be a part of the solution. Like Faith Tabernacle wants to be multicultural more than ever before. You want to be a pastor of all people. You don't want to be segregated. You want that's the solution. You want to teach that to your people, and you want to go serve not just your neighborhood, but serve with other churches. I mean, there may not be a theology agreement on everything, but man, if you can link up with another church that's got another person or a group of influencers that you can together, I mean, where's the downside of that?
Right.
You know, so I love that. I see people coming together more than ever before. I talked to you about Flint Pride.
Yeah.
I see people just, doing things just like COVID. COVID's brought it all together. COVID is as inconvenient as it was. We had people having family dinners again. People's lives slowed down. Churches, drew together. I just think there's a lot of good that came out of that situation, and this is no exception. And so I see a lot of that positive because it's been a month now. We're still having conversations, which is huge because now we know that it's part of our diet.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I'm going to tell you, that's historic again. There will be people, and I can tell you this because I know them by name, they do not want peace. They do not want one person getting something over on another person. And I will tell you that I have no problem confronting people and saying, this is the issue that you have with me, or this is the issue I have with you. We're either going to have an accord or we're going to agree to disagree, and I'll know where you stand. But if you don't have those conversations, you're always waiting for that flip. That's why people lost trust in the government with the water crisis.
Yeah.
Because nobody was telling the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
Even if it's bad, just rip the Band-Aid off and say, I screwed up.
Yeah.
I believe this. I think you're a jerk.
Right.
Why do you think I'm a jerk? Number one, you got to be courageous to tell me. Number two, I got to be courageous enough to hear it and not react. Like, tell me why. Just like this, if somebody in this neighborhood has a problem with this church because something happened 20 years ago, then and you wonder why I'm not saying there is, but that person or you should go and say, hey, let's talk about this. But if people don't want to talk and all they want to do is needle,
Right.
which they will be there. Those people, those are wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
You just got to be aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to invite those who are on Facebook, if you have some comments, if you want to ask a question of the sheriff, now would be a time to do that as we venture into a little bit more here in this podcast. Let's see if there's anything real quick as we're looking. Lisa Hyman says, can you ask the sheriff if he thinks that Jesus believes in white privilege? Okay. And if so, all right, that's a little framed a certain way. Let's reword that question and say, what is your understanding of white privilege, and kind of how can we help those in our midst that are still kind of grappling with that concept? I think a lot of people react to that concept of saying, well, I didn't have anything to do with slavery. I didn't have anything to do with that. I've never made a racist comment to anybody. What are you talking about? So has that been something that you would be willing to speak to and just say, hey, here's what my understanding and how we can help? Yeah.
Well, first of all, Jesus was Middle Eastern, and he makes the best food ever. When I go to Middle Eastern restaurants, it is Jesus food all the way. Second of all, I think that it's a real term. And what I've learned, especially in my career, but most recently, is perception's reality.
Yeah.
So if I don't agree with the term, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
It's almost like poverty doesn't exist. Yeah, it does.
Right.
And I can take you to it. And what I think people need to realize is instead of fighting the term, let's look at what's beyond it. So let's take the word privilege, period. because I grew up different than the way my boys are growing up, okay? I grew up in public schools. My parents, bless their heart, struggled their whole life, worked hard. I have worked extremely hard and given a lot of opportunity. And because of that, my boys are very, very, very comfortable.
Yeah.
I tithe on gross. I take care of my biblical convictions. I do that. My kids have traveled. I mean, God has provided so much for my family. I'm just so much.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of people that have done the exact same thing,
Yeah.
but haven't had the same results. So to my boys, absolutely, they are set up for greater results and greater opportunity because of the environment that they had no choice on it.
Right. Right.
That's why anybody watching, if you're born in the United States, you've been given a privilege because you weren't born in another country.
Right. Right.
I think we need to be honest to say that anybody has a privilege. We just got to recognize what it is and be humbled and be grateful that we have that privilege.
Yeah.
Do I think I have advantages because I'm a white male? Yeah. I mean, I know that because I've heard people that are not white say they didn't have that same advantage. Who might argue that?
Yeah.
But I will also say things that take away the white part of it. Being a police officer, I mean, being an American, being an athletic male. I mean, I have a lot of things that I can say that I have privilege on. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just, let's talk real.
Right.
Let's talk real.
That's good.
You know, and I think people need to hear that. So that's
Yeah.
the answer to that question.
I think that's good. Now, I'm not sure what this term means.
Yeah, me either.
That shows my education. But, Sheriff, do you think qualified immunity should be ended? What's qualified immunity?
Qualified immunity is
Yeah.
a civil legal term,
Okay.
meaning that as the sheriff constitutionally, I have immunity from being sued by doing my job.
Okay.
And so what the conversation is if somebody does an act while working for the government and it is within their responsibilities, they have immunity, qualified immunity.
Right.
But if they act outside of that, then they now are subject to what's called punitive damages, which means that they can come after what you owe because you are outside your, what I call scope of care or outside your duty.
Gotcha.
What they're talking about is qualified immunity across the board, which I think can be dangerous because now you have a field that by doing your job, you will get sued, and by not having any immunity whatsoever, even by doing your job, it opens up your family, opens up everything you work for, maybe family businesses. So I think that's very dangerous. Now, that being said, I've been sued plenty of times personally, and many times as a defendant and a plaintiff's attorney can list you as an individual. That means that I'm not suing Chris as this, I'm suing Chris as an individual, which allows me to be, if damages are paid through a jury, to have punitive damages, which is very scary. Now, there are things and people that are done that I absolutely believe you are so outside that you're not protected by us, you're on your own. And I think that goes back to when we talk about reform. Reform not only has to come within a police department, it has to come within the police unions who protect people that have no business being in this field, who give us all a very, very, very poor example of what we're not. And then on the flip side, God bless them, because I know a lot of them, you have civil attorneys that sponsor major baseball teams, football teams, that have advertisements all over, including Florida. If this happens, sue. If you lose your job, sue. So we know in this field, because I want to believe that I don't think there's another field that gets sued more than medical and law enforcement.
Right. Yeah.
And because of that, many times police leaders are probably a little bit hesitant to take action because they don't want to be sued. If anybody's been sued, you know it is the worst. Abraham Lincoln said it's second only to death because of the depositions and all the interrogatories, and they say whatever they want, and somebody files a complaint, and whatever they put in that complaint, it doesn't even have to be true. And they put it out there, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, who is this person? So whoever asked the question is spot on. They obviously have a legal background. I think it's very dangerous, but I think people that act outside the confines of their duties, hey, they're fair game. Have at it. Because if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear.
Cool. So as we get ready to transition into criminal justice, the prison reform conversation, there's a really important question
It
here.
really is.
Yeah, I think you might.
Yeah. So Nolan Moore asks this question to both me and Kyle: who can bench more?
No, you and Chris.
Oh, me and Chris. Oh, okay. Who can bench more, Marvin or Chris?
We'll have to find that out.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Who
We'll
asked
do
that?
arm wrestling.
Nolan.
Nolan Moore.
Nolan, you are my favorite right now.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing when I saw those guns. I'm like, dang,
I
Gina.
mean,
Yeah.
I do a little something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's another whole podcast we're talking about. But I love talking athletics and bodybuilding, so that's awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
So we've got another 15 minutes. I was going to quote Ephesians 5:11. It says this: "Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them." And something that I think is really important for Americans to understand in this moment is how much progress we've made since the 1800s and so forth, but how much progress we need to continue to make as it relates to some of the systemic issues that we're facing in our society that are putting our African American brothers and sisters in some context kind of a cyclical process of being incarcerated, reincarcerated, not rehabilitated, and they just get kind of stuck into that system. And for one reason or another, which has more of a historic conversation to it, we find that the percentages of African Americans getting caught into our legal system and never able to get out are much higher than any other cultural group represented in our country. And so I guess the question is, we just wanted to look to you to see, number one, do you think there's a problem with our prison system? And if you could help some of our viewers who may not be aware, we have a lot of pro-law enforcement viewers. I'm a pro-law enforcement guy. And as a result, sometimes it becomes this thing where we're not allowed to criticize the justice system because it's America and we're patriots and we've got the best in the world and we've got the American exceptionalism thing going. But that can be dangerous to where we get to a point where we ignored things that really do need to be reformed. And so we just wanted to hear your thoughts on where you think the American prison system is and what some practical things that we as Christians can begin to advocate for to see. I mean, we're talking about things like mandatory minimums and things that just can really create a perpetual experience of injustice for certain individuals.
Well, I'm not sure I can cover all that in 15 minutes,
I
but I will tell you
understand.
this.
Do your best.
Without a doubt, if anybody studies economics, you know about inflation. So the more we go on in life, the less the dollar is able to buy because cost goes up. Well, when it comes to incarceration, I call it the science of deflation. Because somebody gets locked up today, the world continues to go, but their world stops.
Yeah.
And so let's just say they do a year, whether it's a county jail, they do 2 years in the joint, right? So for the 2 years they're doing in prison, the world has gone 2 years. So they come out, they're 4 years behind. And many times generations will never catch up.
Yeah.
Not only that, they're tagged with the felony. Not only that, they have lost their education. And not only that, there's a lot of things that, and what happens is they have, I'm not making excuses because wrong is wrong. They go back into the same lifestyle and now you see recidivism. That's one example.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who go to jail or prison. That's the last time they go and they'll never go again. There's a lot of people who get right on the edge and got so scared and are like, man, I'm changing my ways. So there is a benefit to the punitive side of, hey, if you do wrong, you got to pay the consequences. And I think everybody knows that.
Sure.
We grew up in that. We should have that.
Yeah.
And there are people, we talked about it off camera, that are just bad people, that hurt people. And we see that with those that attack our vulnerable, our kids, people that are seeking to destroy vulnerable adults and all sorts of. There's people that incarceration, the separation of society has to happen in order to keep society safe. But to your point, I give you an example. The Genesee County Jail today has 438 inmates in it right now. Okay, in the county population, there's 425,000 people in Genesee County. About 85,000 live in the city of Flint. So when you look at the race ratio in Genesee County, it's about a 25% African American, 75% white throughout the whole county. Of those 438 people in the jail, we're about 50-50 African American and white. It depends. Sometimes it's 48-52, sometimes it's 49-51. So you can't dismiss that. So it accounts for a quarter of the population, I'm estimating, and half the population in the jail. Okay? It's funny that most people think that the Genesee County Jail is full of African Americans, which it's not. It's 50-50, as mentioned.
Yeah.
Of those 10 inmates, 9 out of 10 of them are addicted or co-addicted.
Yeah.
White and black.
Right.
Of those 10, 5 to 6 out of 10 are mentally ill on some type of psychotropic medication. They have some type of mental illness, white and black.
Yeah.
The average education in the jail is 6th to 9th grade. and nearly half of them struggle to read.
Wow.
So all that together, that's just Genesee County.
Yeah.
And you look at the state budget for the Michigan Department of Corrections, which is in the billions of your tax dollars and mine. There's got to be a better option. Now, Chris can't change the world yet. Chris can't change the state yet. Chris can't do a lot. But what Chris can do is take the position of influence he has right now and create a solution.
Right.
So what we've done, we started it last year, not knowing any of this was going to happen, is I started a program with my predecessor, who I brought the idea to, and I know the benefit of education. It's called Ignite. Inmate growth naturally, intentionally through education. And that means that the Genesee County Jail is transitioning from incarceration to education. Not a floor, not a pod, the entire jail.
Yeah.
So 5 days a week, an hour before lunch, an hour before dinner, the whole place is going to school.
Good.
We partner with Microsoft and GTL, which is our video visitation and our online supplier for emails and phone conversations. Each inmate, when they are classified, are going to be in one of 3 tiers based on how long their stay. So 0 to 60 days, 60 to 180 days, 80 days, 180 days and beyond. And in those 3 tiers, they do beginner, intermediate, and advanced curriculum. So literally, instead of the world going on and them stopping, they're dragging along with the world. And while they're in jail, and they're getting clean, and they're getting protected, now they're learning the power of education. So they're learning skilled trades. They're learning how to speak a foreign language. They're learning about European history. They're learning about whatever. And based on everything they do and their abilities, I don't care if they need to learn colors and numbers, everybody's going to have the opportunity. And everybody's going to be given the opportunity, and based on their success, they'll be given an award. Recognition. We've got people in the jail that have never been recognized for anything they've done good. So what's the purpose of trying? So the whole system of Ignite is based on a meritocracy, because that's what the world is. You do your part, the world will reward you. And keep doing your part, and the bigger the reward. Just keep working harder. What didn't happen here? Keep working harder. Work longer. Sleep less. I mean, that's success of America. So to answer your question, I'm convinced the way to solve the incarceration problem is to keep them from going in the system right out of the gate. And you can't give somebody a better option of addictions if there's no option for them to go to. You can't. And I believe that through many times people having value restored in their life, that value will give them the hope that there's a better way to choose than slinging dope. There's a better way to choose than going back into the old ways. Now, if I can train somebody how to lay block or do flat work or mix grout or mix mud, they can go to one of the concrete companies and start out at $19 an hour instead of going back in the world and get right back into it. So these are some of the things, but Ignite is hopping right now. I mean, you talk about linking up when people get out of jail with an employer or Jobs Corps. Now they have that ability to be a provider in life. And the other thing, if ever given the opportunity, you have people that have done bad, and that felony tag is on them for the rest of their life. So when it's asked if you've been convicted of a felony, they got to say yes. And I don't care. You talk about judgment. Society always goes back. Unless you're a felon, someone says, I'm a convicted felon, you immediately say, hide the purse, kids. That's okay, man. We're about to get jacked. No. So
that's good.
That's another great conversation. But I know that, again, I believe that I'm in here as a sheriff right here for such a time as this. And I believe in the short time that I've been here, it's opening up doors to make these changes. So there's not a county jail in the country doing this. And we're doing it here in Flint.
Yeah, and everything you're saying goes back to education, and that's what we're trying to do is educate ourselves, educate the members of our church, and hopefully those who want to be a fly on the wall to this conversation. But I guess I am curious, like I hear these conversations about the omnibus crime bill of 1994. I hear conversations about the overhaul during the days of Reagan and Nixon and those the war on drugs and stuff. Is there any takeaways you have from those conversations for someone who just haven't ventured into that yet, where you can say, yeah, there might need to be some changes on the legislative level to make the system run more smoothly? I just kind of wanted to...
that's a huge monster to tackle, but I'm going to tell you, the heroin addiction problem, the opiate problem we have on pills, the cocaine, the crack's coming back, methamphetamine. I mean, that stuff that's real. Right now, it's not our focus because of what's happening around the country, but you have to have your hand around that throat of addictions, because there's no population that's not impacted by that.
Yeah.
Everybody watching right now knows somebody who is either addicted, an alcoholic, or has been, or died of an overdose, or something like that. So that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm always into reform and looking what worked at, because we're a lot different society now than we were back in the 80s or even in the 90s. But you have to have drug enforcement. You can't. There are certain things that are so destructive. We just had an overdose. I mean, they happen all the time, hot doses. And you see people's families get shattered because of addictions.
Yeah.
And,
So do you think that there's a kind of an approach that gets taken to the addict that's a little more rehabilitative, restorative, and then there's a different approach towards the individual who's perpetuating the drug dealing and destroying the lives of it? So I kind of think of it as, what I have seen potentially has taken place since the 60s and 80s and 90s is that our society has become more and more aware of addiction's connection to mental health. And do you see that understanding also beginning to run in law enforcement circles, where it's like, okay, yes, in some situations we have a bad dude who is literally selling crack to the community and destroying lives. We've got to separate him from society, versus, okay, this is someone who, they're a repeat offender, but they're an addict. They need mental health. They need rehabilitation. So is there something along those lines that might be helpful?
Yes to all what you said. You have to go past an addict is not always a criminal. They're an addict. And I've got plenty of stories and save stories and death stories where people they could not beat the addiction. It's the dragon. Then you have addicts that also sell, which now they've crossed over into, now you're supplying the death of other people. Because really, addictions is daily suicide. That's all it is. And then you have the whole side where people supply this group of vulnerable people, because some are more addictive than others. Some are more vulnerable than others. And it is a huge trade. It's a multi-billion-dollar trade. Well, now you don't need to go to South America or Middle East to get heroin. You can make fentanyl, here in the United States. You can import it from other countries. So you don't have to. You can make methamphetamine in a house right next to a church. So these are the things that are happening that people are starting to front, and we can't take our eye off that. So to your point, yes, it's a mental illness. I said 9 out of 10 people that come to the jail are co-addicted or addicted to alcohol or drugs or both. I mean, that's a huge problem. And so I have, what comes first? Is the crime then the drug, or the drug then the crime? I don't know. But I know that through mental health, you talk about the complications of law enforcement. We're called to be psychiatrists, psychologists, all sorts of things for somebody who's mentally ill that doesn't have the ability to go get the treatment like they used to be here. So that's why mental health court with Judge Barkey is so successful. You're talking a court that takes people that have had violent felonies. They do a year program in her court, and after a year, through all these different processes of getting their head right, getting their body straight, getting them detoxed, getting them back in society, she drops charges. They go from felons to free because it treats the addictions. Those people are a great group of people, but it's not everybody. And when you look at property crimes, the majority of property crimes that are done, whether it's larcenies or B&Es or armed robberies, is to feed people's habits. You look at the sex trade, you look at the prostitution. I mean, nobody wakes up and says, you know what, I think it's a great day to make some money, and I have no... They go to prostitution because it's a means to fund their addictions, and it's a sad decision that has to be made sometimes. But again, yes on all points, but I think we're on a path to do those changes.
I just had just one question, and I know that we're probably going to wrap up in the next couple minutes.
We got a little wiggle room.
We still have some
little wiggle room.
Okay. So one question here. We'll just read this one then. This is from Mike Kennedy. He says, who do we contact to hire out of that program? I think he's talking about
Ignite.
the Ignite program.
What we are doing is we've partnered with, we have a long time ago for Mount Morris Consolidated Schools. And the services that we have in the county that are already established have already committed that we're a partnership. So we want to simplify it. Where that will come in is, you talk about how people can help, what can they do, is our deputies that are to do care, custody, control of inmates. They're not teachers. They're not mentors, not coaches. So as this progresses, we have agreement made right now between the county board and GTL. We have fiber wire being pulled. We have this COVID set us back 4 months for obvious reasons. But we're going to need people from the community to go to these floors and to sit and mentor people that have never been mentored.
Yeah.
And we're going to need people, not for a ministry. We have our Forgotten Men ministry, but these are people that need to be educational mentors to show people, to encourage people, which is to their point, when the time is right, we will be doing the same thing we did for COVID. We will reach out to our church families, to our educational professionals, and say, I need these things filled.
Yeah.
And if you could fill these and you could commit to it, then this is what we're going to do, because it can't be all the sheriff's office.
Yeah, I think that's a great practical point, and that's where Marvin and I say, hey, call us, let us know.
Yeah.
We'll get the word out on our end, and we want to be part of that solution. And I know we've covered a lot of ground here today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. One thing that just kept coming back to my mind throughout the entirety of this conversation is that with all of these, ideas and advancements and potential strategies of how to improve, there's always that vacuum that the church has to step up and fill. And so I can appreciate the fact that you giving us a little bit of background on the story where you joined the protesters. And I think that's what I would like a lot of our audience to have a takeaway on today, is that it's going to be that David in the backfield, the shepherd, he's just doing the best with what's put in front of him. He's shepherding the flock. He's killing the bear. He's killing the lion. And little did he know that moment where he's delivering some items to his brother would be, now I'm in front of the giant. And everything that I learned back there in the field, I've got to draw upon that.
Yeah.
And so it goes to say, God can use you if you will simply be consistent in the small little things that he puts right in front of you. And just in that blink of an eye, everything, all that consistency, all of that faithfulness can come into action all at once. And so I think a lot of Christians struggle with being motivated to be faithful. And I think that's where it comes to a head and full circle. So I really appreciate it. Sheriff,
thanks,
God
brother.
bless you for coming in.
Bless you.
Let us know what you think about this conversation. And please reach out to your local law enforcement friends and family members and share this with them, but also tell them how much you appreciate them, because they need to hear it right now. It's a tough time for law enforcement. It's a tough time for the African American community. And on both ends of that, we need to be active as believers, reaching out and saying, we love you. What can we do for you? God bless, and we'll see you next week.